Welcome to Absolutely. My name is Benny, and that is Hassan. And today we're going to talk about Roar! House of Dragon!
It's like a giant bird.
We get together regularly talking about your favorite TV shows and movies and just rumor mills going on in the world of entertainment. If you want to support this channel, please consider going to G Fuel. Use the code COMICS at checkout. And check out these great shirts at Into the AM with the link down below. All right. Today, we're going to talk about House of Dragon, episodes 1 and 2. And before we can get into this and just, let's at least discuss one thing real quick. I'm a big Game of Thrones fan. My opinion on the last season is that it is trash, but hey, it's not, we don't decide the endings to things. So, you know what? They can have an ending. I can disagree with it and still enjoy the entire show for the most part. That's how I look at Game of Thrones. How about you, Hassan? How big of a fan of Game of Thrones are you?
I got into it super late in the game. It was the summer right before it started airing the final season. I binged all of it. Was lovely. I had a great time doing it up until like the last couple seasons because it felt like watching it on a binge, you notice the real dip in quality as far as the writing is concerned.
I don't even consider what happened there to be a dip in quality for the record. What I consider happening is they were stretching the books out as far as they could, hoping he would write more books, and he didn't. So then it kind of took a TV format and sped everything up.
See, my roommate and my best friend, he is like the biggest Game of Thrones obsessive, has all the books, read all the lore, everything. And what they actually did was they had way more material to adapt, but D&D wanted out. So by, I believe it's season 5 or 6, they started cutting huge portions of the books that would have led through like a whole season arc plus, right? They would cut portions of it, and then they sped through the point where they were at the end, but it was because they sped through it. George R. R. Martin has talked about it. He thinks the show could have ran for 13 seasons, and with the material they had, they didn't even need another book.
Right.
For me, I mean,
that's the rumor that they wanted out because they got a Star Wars deal. That's never been confirmed or denied. That they never sat down and said, we're trying to leave Game of Thrones. Because I honestly believe that if they were trying to leave, HBO just would have swapped them out.
They
guys,
they could. Well, they couldn't because George R. R. Martin, when he was very picky when he originally picked showrunners for the show. I did a whole thing where I deep dived into the history of it. So here's a little history lesson for you guys. When the show was initially being conceived, he didn't want multiple showrunners cycling through the show because that'll often mess with tone, right? Because you have Eric Wallace is now the showrunner of Flash, and he does a completely different thing than the people beforehand. None of them do anything good, but besides the point, he specifically put in their contracts, their ironclad contracts with HBO, that hey, they will have to be the showrunner until the end of this show. They need to see it through fruition. So while everybody, the studio, because obviously HBO doesn't want to stop making Game of Thrones. They're making so much money. Yeah. George R. R. Martin doesn't want to stop making Game of Thrones. It's his IP, and there were chapters and chapters and chunks of this book, really interesting storytelling that was completely cut out. There's this whole thing with Catelyn Stark becoming a weird zombie creature thing after Jon. You know how Bran is a warg and he can see out of the eyes of the Raven? All the Stark children can see out of the eyes of their direwolves and stuff. A lot of stuff, significant stuff that elongated the story and honestly gave more texture to the world, was significantly cut from this. Even the way, the looks of things. I think House of Dragon so far has been honestly a lot more faithful as far as bringing that world to life, and not just in a TV format, but even, you notice they redid the Iron Throne. It looks a lot more like the Iron Throne in the books, and less kind of silly. You look like you could stab your hand on this Iron Throne.
Well, I just want to wrap up the thoughts that were cooking the original, then we're going to move right into House of Dragon. But I mean, I didn't deep dive into the history of everything. I do think the last 2 seasons felt rushed. I always thought that it was rushed because they were just trying to get through it in a hurry to wrap up and do other things, but not in a sense of, we got to leave, we got to go to Star Wars, but in a sense of HBO's shit, we don't get a book, let's stop winging it and go do something else, kind of a thing.
Right. There was this iconic quote from them because they had this after show for every episode. During, I think it's the third to last episode of the original show, they say the quote, Dany forgot about the Iron Fleet, and that's how they explained why she drove into where the Iron Fleet was and one of her dragons got killed. It's insane because this is an army, they're planning an attack, they know everything, they've mapped it all out, and Dany forgot, and it was a thing, and the D&D have said it multiple times. When the season started airing, they're like, well, we're gonna be as far away from everything as possible because we don't think anyone's gonna enjoy this. I actually don't mind the ending though. I love how it ended. I don't like how they took us to the ending, but I don't mind Bran being on the Iron Throne. I don't love Jon being thrown off into.
I feel like they wasted the North Hole situation, which I find weird that House of Dragon is already setting that back up. when like the North stuff just felt like when it finally happened, it was kind of rushed down to a very dark and grim fight, and then we just rushed to the finale of it. The Dany changing personality thing, I actually disagree with because I don't think she changed personality. The whole point of the show is the Targaryens go in this route. And every time she showed herself kind of breaking out of it, she would then burn everyone in the town. Like,
right. Well, and there's supposed to be gradual progression of it. Like Jon and Dany, like I don't mind that they get together and they're incestuous. It's very Game of Thrones of it, right? But it would have been a lot more impactful to watch them like, because they're great actors with good chemistry, but they didn't get any time on screen to like fall in love and then have a dramatic heartbreak. So like her death doesn't hold as much of weight as it should, and like everything doesn't. But it's kind of turning into a Game of Thrones discussion, which I think we could absolutely get into later.
But I was going to say, let's move on to House of Dragon. All I wanted to do is set up how we feel it, because I feel like a lot of going into House of Dragon is going to be, there's a reason I wanted to start with this, okay? Because a lot of the people I'm talking to that refuse to watch House of Dragon is based upon their feelings from Game of Thrones. Yeah. I know a lot of people that are like, those last 2 seasons are shit. I will never touch anything Game of Thrones related again. And that's why I wanted to open talking about how we felt about Game of Thrones, because the problem is, it was one of the most controversial endings to a TV show ever. It really was a big deal. It took over everything. So you need some context going into House of Dragon because, and I found this weird, even at the ending of the first episode, I think it was the first or the second. No, first. They do a speech about the Song of Ice and Fire. He talks about how this is going to happen, how we're going to get attacked from the north, how there needs to be a Targaryen on the throne. And I'm like, so you're not just throwing out Ice and Fire. You want people to remember Ice and Fire. So that's definitely going to play on your feelings about how Ice and Fire ended. Because
and I would say Game of Thrones had like it fell, right? It ended, and I have never seen a further just like this is a pop culture icon that everyone in their families is getting together to watch, and like it's like a huge cultural experience, and then everyone's like, F this, we're not going to talk about it anymore. We hate Game of Thrones. I've never seen something like that happen. So
which is why HBO is claiming that this is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, release they've ever had.
I literally was not going to watch this. I saw the announcements. I saw Matt Smith getting casted. I couldn't care less, right? And then the episode rolled around, and there was nothing else to do that night, and we put it on. And me and my 2 roommates, both of them are huge Game of Thrones fans, we sat down to watch, and all of us felt very scorned by the ending of Game of Thrones. We weren't super happy with it.
That's why I wanted to open by talking about Game of Thrones ending.
Well, and to my surprise, here's my initial thoughts of episode 1. Oh my God, Game of Thrones, man, I used to love this. Yeah. I love medieval fantasy. I love the political ongoings and then the hedonism and stuff. I absolutely will never watch that first episode ever again, though. That was one time.
So here's my problem. I had the exact same reaction. I wasn't going to touch House of Dragon until I saw how it was getting reactions on it. And then us in our group chat for Absolutely Marvel at DC, I was like, all right, is anyone going to watch House of Dragon? We can actually get on something early, because if at least one person will watch it, I'll watch it, and we'll see what we think about it. And so I watched the last 2 episodes over the last 2 days, so I would be very fresh on the whole thing. My biggest problem is, and I know, my hair is just driving me crazy today. My hair. I know that Game of Thrones is a slow burn. That's one thing I liked about Game of Thrones, is that it is a slow burn. But there's something about these 2 episodes and then the start of Game of Thrones, which I vaguely remember at this point, and I will admit, I vaguely remember. It's not like I sit around watching the first season of Game of Thrones. It feels extra slow. I feel like this show has kicked off with episodes 1 and 2, and they're like, you know what Game of Thrones is. You know this is a 17, 80-hour season thing. We're going to take the time to set it up, to set everything up. And it's just so much sitting down and just talking. That first episode's tonally, it threw me off, because it would go from like, all right, let's all sit down and have a discussion about the political climate of the Targaryen nation and what we're going to do with my first heir and what heir is going to take over. By the way, let's cut to Matt Smith's character. I think it's Daemon. I think is what they call him.
Daemon Targaryen.
Yeah. Let's cut to Daemon. He's going to mass murder everyone. Okay, that was your action. Back to the political intrigue. Okay, nothing's happening. We're just arguing. Okay, now we're going to cut to a jousting, because we got to get some action spliced in.
Benny,
here.
that is Game of Thrones, though. That is Game of Thrones. Up until the last 3 seasons, that was the whole goddamn show.
It was to an extent. Fighting. I feel like I don't know what it is, and I was figuring this out on episode 2. I feel like one thing it's the sound mix is what I think is throwing me off. I think that's the tonal shift that is bothering me. Okay, for the record, I'm liking the show. I am liking learning about medieval fantasy. I love the fact that the dragons are in there right away, that we're discussing like technology, like a C-section and how they're going to handle it. Then seeing them immediately go to maggots eating rotting flesh off. I love this. This whole thing is great. But the tonal shift is what's throwing me off because we go so hard into the epic. Let's talk for 10 minutes. And the 10 minutes just feels longer. And you can tell the script writing is completely different from Game of Thrones because there's a lot of padding in the script writing. There's a lot of just discussion for the sake of having a discussion. And then the sound mix. So in Game of Thrones, there wasn't a ton of music, but there was a lot of ominous ambience and stuff like that going on. There is zero in this show. And they've made a point, I think, to raise the level of the sound effects. To the point of there's a discussion at night in episode 2, okay? And if you haven't figured it out, we're going to kind of go around both episodes because it's a lot to talk about, so we're just going to kind of hit our points. But there's a point in episode 2 where they're talking at night, and you can hear the crickets. You can literally hear the crickets, and it's loud and it's prominent. And my wife, because we're watching it tonight, is like falling asleep because this discussion is just going on, and I'm listening to the crickets, and I'm like, something is off with this mix. Like you're literally going from a dragon bursting out of the clouds with the epic Game of Thrones music to literal crickets.
That's weird. I didn't like none of that stood out to me in my brain when I was watching it. So I guess we just like we both have very different viewing experiences too. Yeah. You have like a theater room with like booming speakers. I have a nice TV, but it's not gonna do that. Yeah, that's super interesting.
And I think that's my biggest problem.
Did you watch them on a binge, like both episodes back to back?
We watched one Wednesday night and then one last night. So each night. Yeah. And I think that's my problem because I'm following what they're saying and I'm enjoying the discussions and how we need an heir and this 12-year-old girl that he might have to marry. But don't worry, he won't sleep with her until she's 14. Like,
yeah,
whole discussion is like, and I like the king. I like the king's attitude. I like what Daemon's doing. We get a lot of reminiscence of Game of Thrones, like the Starks showed up and the Lannisters showed up. You see their heirs, their heritage. You see King's Fall, like you said at the beginning. The throne looks amazing. It's huge. It's sprawling.
It's what it was supposed to be.
Yeah,
it could even go a pinch crazier, honestly.
And I also then I'll let you just do your Hussin thing. I love that the dragons are here and they're so well animated.
They look so fantastic.
They look alive.
They look so much better. Also, the fact that like we don't have to wait 8 seasons to see dragons. Dragons are here. Dragons will be hanging out, and we will.
And they're in
dragons.
both episodes right now. They show up primarily in the first one for a ride, and then we have like a standoff in the second one, which is great.
I love the standoff. I love the power dynamics.
Yeah.
I also, growing up watching Doctor Who, never thought I would have to see a butt-naked Matt Smith on screen, and here I am. I've seen the 6 Doctors, sonic screwdriver, if you will, and I wasn't a fan of having to watch that, but hey, it is what it is. I'm sure some people absolutely love that, but yeah, I have very different feelings. I think I liked it a lot. I think episode 2 was the one that I liked less than the first one, but the first one's the one I'll never watch again. The scene of Rhaenyra, I don't remember her name is. It's the mother getting killed, basically, like
being held down while they force a C-section on her.
And then she's like, "Hey, what's happening? What's happening?" Like, it's one of the most horrific things I've ever watched. Period. And I was like shaking watching that. And me and my roommates were like, "We're never gonna watch this again, if that's okay." And
pansies.
Other than that, hey man, yeah, I'm a pansy. But the actresses in it, the actress who plays Rhaenyra and Alice of Hightower are amazing. Specifically, the one who plays the Targaryen queen or the new heir to the throne. She is incredible. She has such little micro expressions that she's really acting. It's not just reading a script, which at some point, like later Game of Thrones, it feels like they're reading a script. This one is not reading a script at all. This is like acting, living in the emotion of it. And
I actually really like the actors and actresses they have picked because if you watch Game of Thrones at the beginning, you can tell a lot of the child actors are just grabbed to put on the show. Mm-hmm. They made sure everyone knew what they were doing this time because that's one of my. I hated Sansa's acting all the way through. I hated her. I didn't like the acting. I didn't like how she handled it.
I just like the character of Sansa. I could never get behind.
And it might have been the character. Maybe I hated the character, but like
the moment she lets a direwolf get killed, I think all of us was just like, we're washing our hands of this. She's trying to date evil Jake Paul. We're not about this.
I don't know. The whole thing I noticed with Game of Thrones is some of the actors aged. You could tell some of them weren't taking acting lessons, basically. And this is obviously from an outsider's perspective. I'm not some
Right,
acting
right.
coach or anything.
But this cast is very, very adept at what they're doing. This
Yeah.
cast is on fire, and it's fantastic to watch a lot of it. Plot wise, I was really invested. I like how they've queued up this Targaryen civil war. Like I honestly understand why it's being set up like this. I like that Daemon is this like crazy, like I go to brothels and I kill people to show my power, and I might marry a whore, kind of like insane. Like he's just trying to stir the pot. He's trying to make like something crazy happen, but also he loves his little niece and he respects her. And hopefully they don't sleep together at some point on the show. And you never know. But hey, he
dude,
really respects
when they
her.
had the whole second episode, they were like, "Oh, she's a Targaryen," and my first thought was, "Right, they all have white hair. That's a very ancestral clan going."
They are, which is that they explain it in the books a lot further. The reason the Targaryens are why they like the reason like the way they are is because of the constant inbreeding. So like they go mad eventually because they're such an incest clan,
Right.
And the black guy in the show with the white hair, he's from a very high up family from the same place. I think Valyria, the same place as the Targaryens.
But
so
I also like I remember season 1. You kind of did like you almost immediately knew everyone was against the king at the time because he was just like this bloated guy who they didn't want around.
Baratheon.
Baratheon. That was it. It's funny with this one because they're setting up almost immediately everyone is on his side. But they're all disagreeing with this decision over the heir. Like, and I kind of like that because in the original Game of Thrones, we were just set up with the king kind of sucks, but he does a passable job. You know what I mean? Like that was the original setup. This one is, no, there's an actual power struggle happening at this point because the wife died, the kid died, there is no heir. Daemon should be the heir, but he can't be the heir. We can't put a princess in charge. You need a new heir. So all the families want to get like in on that. I like the setup. What's going on here?
Yeah. And so like, I was really, really jarred, and me and my friends discussed this thoroughly. Like, what the hell was the political decision that was made to marry Alice of Hightower, right? Obviously, don't touch that child, but also in Game of Thrones and the Game of Thrones verse, like the age demographics, marriage have different meanings, and it's stupid.
Old medieval times, people were getting married at like 12 or 13 and having kids.
They were.
As much as we all can agree now that's gross and nasty, that was the lifestyle back then. Like
it was.
It would be a 50-year-old guy getting a 12-year-old.
And here's the thing: we're not trying to glorify that lifestyle, and I think immediately they try not to by saying, "Hey, he doesn't even want to marry the 12-year-old," and then they double back on it because he does want to marry the 15-year-old, and through the preview of the next episode, it's like tacked on at the end.
I don't think he wants to.
Give her a baby.
I think because he's made it clear multiple times he doesn't even want to remarry.
But I think if you didn't want to remarry, you marry the child, the political gain, and you stay as far away from her as possible. You don't you don't touch her. You don't talk to her really.
And it's like you said. I think you're right. I think that would have been the proper answer politically. You marry her for a political appearance.
It was like the only decision that made sense. Like it would have reinforced his power. Would have made him the strongest in the land. No one's going to contest his throne. Daemon Targaryen can't come at him. He would be just.
Well, and I think that's what we're going to find out. Why did he pick the other girl? Why did he pick the 15-year-old girl who also doesn't seem to want to do this either? Like what is the decision in that? And I hope we're going to figure that out.
Because the Hightowers don't make sense politically. Isaiah said, he's my roommate that read everything. He's like, they have some kind of significance in like the Maester realm. Like their family is high up there, but there's not real power to it the way it would have been with the other Valyrian guy's family. So it was like politically, like I was really jarred by the decision. I don't know if you saw the preview at the end of the episode, but they tack on at the end just like a small clip. And in it, Alice Hightower is holding a baby. And they've been doing a ton of time skips. So he does get her pregnant too, which I think that's something to think about.
Well, maybe it's that. Maybe he just can't get past mentally. I'm supposed to be with the 12-year-old, but he's like, well, at least the 15-year-old is.
If I'm with the 15-year-old, I'm gonna fuck. That's what he said. He's like, you know what? If there's 12, that's yucky. It's icky. She's not a grown woman, but when she's 15, that's a grown adult woman. In every way that matters in my world.
Yeah, I do. I don't know. It's weird. It's weird that this is such a thing in the show that they're making very prominent, but I know it is based on the book Fire and Blood. I actually didn't think this one was based on a book. I thought this one was just
cool. This book is actually written in the perspective of a historian in the universe. So a maester wrote this story like chronicling what happened during the Targaryen Civil War. So it's kind of cool. It's like written from that perspective. So
Okay.
it's interesting how they're adapting it.
What do you think
other
about
relationships?
Well, the other, I mean, there's not too many other major relationships.
I was gonna say I kind of thought
Just
Rhaenyra and Alice of Hightower had a little romance going. I think one of them had feelings for each other for sure. That there was like subtle, and that's why the heartbreak of Alice of Hightower being with the dad is so much worse, because I think that there was a dynamic there. Maybe reading into that too much, but I thought
look,
maybe there was
right
something.
now where the show stands, we haven't seen too many other things other than a couple passing glances and stuff like that. But this is Game of Thrones; that could go on for 9 seasons before someone's like, "I kind of liked you in the early days."
Yeah.
What do you think about them setting up this evil, like these people on the shore that are feeding people to crabs? Who, when we finally got a full glance of, I can't decide if they're humanoid or if they're like another zombie-like creature.
Santa Game of Thrones fanfare. You got to throw in some fantasy freaks.
Yeah.
And dude, it was upsetting. I was eating dinner and watching Game of Thrones. Big mistake. I'm eating a bite of food and I
No.
see them taking a bite of flesh. So
Yeah.
that was the end of that for me. I don't know. It's gonna be interesting, especially because that was the immediate reason the Valerian guy. I'll be better at names later in this, guy. Sorry about that. But the Valerian guy, the reason he was like, I need your power. We need to make a move. We need
Right.
to consolidate. It was because that was happening.
Well-
and King's like, nah.
So here's my problem right now with Game of Thrones. So far, we're almost setting up a very similar plot to the original. There's an impeding threat that no one really believes or knows about. They're all kind of ignoring while they're having an inner struggle over the throne and who's going to be the heir. They've changed up a couple things. We have water-based monsters instead of snow-based zombies. We have an heir situation instead of everyone just trying to take the throne for themselves. We have a couple
I'll
changes.
say the water-based monsters, I don't think that's going to last more than 2 episodes. Because
You don't think so?
you got to remember, we have dragon power. We have so many dragons. One dragon going over that area and Dracarysing them, it's over. Like they're...
Well, I mean, that's the
'cause-
point of the Targaryens. They held power by just nuking literally everything.
Yeah. So I don't think that... I think that, hey, maybe they'll set up the
Maybe
White
maybe that'll be
Walker-
the show of power. Like,
Yeah, it's
hey,
like the White
don't
Walker
mess with
levels
us.
of... Yeah, it's like the White Walker level villain, right? Except they kill it in 2 episodes into the show because they're that good now. They're that powerful.
Yeah. All right. Be interesting to see.
Yeah.
Where do you think the show's going to go? Let's just wrap this whole thought
So,
on the first two.
I know
Because the
they
problem is they just
casted-
talked for 2 episodes, which is
They
great,
talked for
but
2
also there's not much to go on.
Did you keep up with how much time passed? Like since the beginning of the show in this, I think like about
6 months? I think at one point towards
more
the
than
end,
that. Because the show started, I think there was a time skip within the first episode, and then it was 6 months after that.
Okay,
So,
because at
it's
the
been
end of
like-
the second
it's-
episode, they clearly state that it's been 6 months since your mother
Yeah.
passed. So
I think it's been about 8 months since the beginning of like the storyline, and I think they're gonna skip again. I know they've already casted older people for both the lead actresses to play like older versions of themselves. So we're moving really fast. So I'm interested to see where.
do
it
we
goes.
know
I
how many
think-
seasons it's supposed to be?
That's a great question.
'Cause,
Honestly, I
I mean,
hope
this
for a
isn't the only thing that HBO's making about Game of Thrones. Supposedly, who knows what's going to happen in the future now?
Yeah, they just greenlit. I know they greenlit a Jon Snow sequel not long ago too.
Yeah, that was going to continue his storyline.
Fine by me. That's you
Oh,
mean the main game.
He, I feel, got the biggest shaft in the main show because
Oh
it
my
was like
God,
they're
he
setting him
did.
up, and then he's like, all right, I'm going back to the north.
I'm
What?
the king in the north. I'm the king beyond the wall, and I don't want it. He's like still over there, being like, I don't want to lead you on.
I don't want to come back. I don't want to do it.
Me and Ghost are gonna go play outside. You rule the kingdom.
I will play fetch with my dog.
He probably got to keep the dragon. The dragon ended up flying back to hang out with him because he's the only Targaryen left. But
Yeah.
yeah, overall thoughts for me on this. I'm excited. I'm gripped. I don't mind there not being as much action because I think this is like the one show that's like very slow paced. It's very like
Oh yeah, and I knew that going into it. I am going to state that I didn't expect this to come in dragons burning and just fighting all day. It took
Pretty
us like
awesome.
6 or 7 seasons to get to a fight in Game of Thrones. That was
Right. Yeah. No. So I'm pretty invested in this for a show that I've completely quit watching and a concept that I didn't give a shit about anymore. So I'm like, wow, do I like Game of Thrones? Like I'm going to Dragon Con today, and when we were just at Emerald City Con a week ago, and I didn't buy a single Game of Thrones related thing because I was like, Game of Thrones is dumb now. Now I'm like, shoot, do I need to get a map of Westeros? Like, do I need to
Oh
buy
my
Jon
God.
Snow's sword? Maybe I'm taking a car today. So
doesn't matter even if a product becomes dumb now. If you enjoyed it in your history, that's all that matters.
right. Yeah.
You read in too much into the TikTok.
This
algorithm.
wasn't. It's not a TikTok thing because this is before TikTok. Game of Thrones ended before TikTok really got prominence. I wasn't happy with the way it ended. I remember being so excited, and then the finale was one of those things where everyone was watching it, so everyone discussed it together.
Yeah.
And the whole world was unhappy about it.
No, I agree.
And,
I agree.
And then D&D immediately, Dan and Dave, whatever their names are, the guys who ran Game of Thrones, lost all their deals. And there's so much joy in my heart. They had a Star Wars deal, they had a Netflix deal, and the way they ruined Game of Thrones, they lost everything. There's some obscure writers in the middle of nowhere now.
Well, the problem is I don't even think it inherently was the writing. It's they had built up like 5 or 6 seasons of like this amazing show and got all those deals, and then they showed that they're willing to abandon ship in a rush. Now, you're saying it's because they were contractually obligated. I think HBO wanted to wrap that up and move on to the prequels. Whatever the actual ingrained reason is, they still rushed to the ending.
Yeah,
which
they
I mean, we
sprinted
can all
to
agree.
it.
Yeah,
Like they cut out things that I promise you were entire like seasons that we watched. They're in the books. There's more seasons in the books, like multiple more seasons that we could have continued to watch, but they cut all of that. They cut the fat so much at the point where they were cutting body with the fat, if that makes sense. They weren't
because that's how I look at it. We were going off the books, and the moment we started getting off book, they were just like, all right, well, let's wrap it up then.
Yeah. I imagine the books are going to have a really cool, conclusive
If
ending.
anime can give us whole seasons to fill time between books, they could have done the same thing with Game of Thrones. They easily could have.
True.
You could have easily been like, hey, George R.R. Martin, we need that within the next 3 years, but don't worry. We're going to explore some side stuff like the faces from Arya Stark. Let's just go into that. Like
Jack and Hagar's whole storyline gets so fleshed out. Arya has like multiple powers beyond what they show her in the show.
I know,
like,
because in multiverses, I'm using them. Anyway. Anyway, we're not going to go back into Game of Thrones. If you want to see our thoughts on Game of Thrones, maybe we'll do that. But the plan is to do a House of Dragon Targaryen review on a weekly basis. So you'll probably get all of our thoughts on the original Game of Thrones over the course of this. Thank you guys for watching today's episode. Don't forget to check out our sponsors, G Fuel and Into the AM, and sign up for our YouTube membership. Starting this month, we'll be doing some unique content for it. See you guys next time right here.